maybe you're getting a little worse. Maybe there's something nagging at you, but you always go later. I know I'm overweight. I know I'm not eating well. I know I haven't been to the gym in a year and a half, but I'll deal with that later. And the problem is, it keeps going down on the to-do list all the time, and we just don't make it a priority.
Welcome to the WellSpan podcast. I'm your host, Scott Fulton. Today's guest is Lorie Eber. Lorie's a wellness coach, but not the wellness coach you probably think of when you think of wellness coaches, because Lorie is a litigator turned wellness coach. As a result of that background, I think, and maybe her New York upbringing, she brings a rather interesting and unique and colorful approach to wellness coaching that's very straightforward, very transparent. She's a real straight shooter. But I think as much as anything, it really helps us to think about how might a wellness coach serve you, or perhaps if you're thinking about being a wellness coach, what might that entail? But it really kind of gets at behavior change. And for all of us, really, let's face it, changing behaviors is never easy. And having a thought partner to help us along that journey often is the difference between success and failure. So with that, let's meet Lorie and get on with the show. Welcome, everyone. Great to have you on the program. Our guest today is Lorie Eber. Lorie, welcome to the WellSpan podcast.
Thank you, Scott. Nice to be here.
Now, what's a little bit unusual, we don't find too often when people make a career pivot. Lorie is a litigator turned wellness coach. How do you go from a litigator to a wellness coach? Those are probably not common paths that we find people following, Lorie.
Because you're weird like me and you don't do anything in a normal fashion. Why would I do that?
It sounds like one pivot wasn't enough. You were going for the triple axle.
Yeah, exactly. When I do things, do it big, right? Don't, retire and do consulting. Boring. Here's the answer in a nutshell. 23 years as a corporate litigator, beat my head against the wall till the male partners let me in, opened and ran a branch office with no idea what at all I was doing for 8 years. And then I was just kind of done with the career. I thought 23 years, long enough to do anything. This was a hell of a ride. I enjoyed it. So I was kind of burned out, and I think if I'm not excited to go to the office and do what I'm spending the majority of my time with, I am wasting my life, and I'm not about wasting my life. My husband will tell you, I'm in the kitchen, I have 2 seconds before we're going to leave. Lorie will find something to do. That's just what I do. The other big factor, frankly, was I'd gotten remarried to my second husband, who thankfully is still my husband. And it finally hit my radar screen that you actually have to devote a little time and attention to make a marriage work. I didn't really do that the first time around. And I'd come home and he'd say, I am not your secretary. So I thought, oh, I'm not too good at going, new role, loving wife. So I just figured if I didn't lose the career, I was going to lose the marriage. So those were my 2 reasons. I was 49 years old and I was the biggest workaholic in the firm, and my partners were shocked and jealous both.
It's funny, as you say that, because of all the things we learn in our education, we pretty much steer away from the things that we truly need to understand, right? So
Yes.
health, relationships. No, we don't want to talk about that.
No, we'll figure that out in our spare time. That's not part of the curriculum.
Yeah, it just always has always really frustrated me, certainly on the health side, of things that we could easily learn. And then, well, you'll pick it up later or as you go along, as you need it, which is.
I will, but the continuation of my story is, in my usual fashion, it took me 10 years to find wellness coaching my passion in life. 10 years. And I wasn't exactly wandering in the wilderness. I was sampling, how about this career? How about that career? As I was finding that I had skills and abilities undeveloped, my brain tells me I kind of squelched them down while I was being a good lawyer. And I was deathly afraid that the only skills and talents I actually had were the ones that fit so nicely in the legal litigator box, and I was going to be a total incompetent for the rest of my life. But it turns out I had other things I could do, so I had to have fun with those and reject them sequentially. And then I found my new career on the internet.
Yeah, it's a to think about going into wellness coaching, as some have, many years ago, the internet has changed wellness coaching in a big way, and in some ways positive, but in other ways, all we've done is confuse people. So,
People are very confused by the internet. I say stay off TikTok.
yeah,
Dangerous
that's
place to live for health advice, I'll tell you.
I
Dangerous.
I claim no knowledge of health activities on TikTok. So.
Uh, that's where all the viral trends start.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I
My
can't say
clients
that I'm
come in and
surprised.
say, I saw this on TikTok, and I say, what were you doing on TikTok? You have me. Come on.
Yeah.
Stop looking at that. Yeah, but I saw it. Okay, then.
Yeah, because every answer should be supplied in 3 seconds or less, and ideally
Exactly.
as a visual image, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Um, and then the other kind of part of this, which I think is good. Obviously, this is the heavier part in terms of when we did our pre-show interview. You talked to me about kind of your experience with dementia, and maybe you can kind of share that journey that no
Okay.
doubt led to where you are today as well.
I had an aging father living in New York, which is where I grew up, and I was very worried about his mental state and his isolation. So I convinced him to move out to California, and he moved into a continuing care facility, which has different levels of care as you basically degrade. Uh, and so he came out here, and I helped him through 15 years of vascular dementia. And that was very tough. We went through, I don't recognize who you are anymore and all those fun things. And when he was 95, I had to switch him from one facility to another. And I did that with a great deal of trepidation because they say it's a bad idea. He's going to take a step back. He already doesn't know where he was. But he really thrived in the final place because they knew how to take care of people with dementia. And you need a whole different model to do that properly. And most of the care facilities don't have that ability. It's more expensive. You have to have more caregivers, and basically, you just let them be who they are and you don't bother them and you cater to them. And so he had a wonderful last 6 months, but it was very tough to go see him just because he was just such a shadow of my real dad that as soon as I saw him, luckily, my husband was very enthusiastic about it and said, it's we need to keep going, and he enjoyed him. So it was tough, but at that same time, I was working in elder care. I started as a volunteer. First thing I did after I resigned from law school, I got a gerontology degree, which is aging studies, and I started volunteering as a way to find out if that might be something I was interested in, or if I could make it into some kind of business, preferably the latter. And so I was working at Council on Aging Orange County doing all kinds of things while I was dealing with the dementia. So I know a lot about dealing with aging parents and how difficult it can be. And also it felt like he died 1,000 deaths, because every time I'd see him, there'd be like less of him. But I'll tell you, I was really shocked because when he actually did die, I started grieving all over again as if I hadn't gone through any of it. And I kind of thought, I got that out of the way. I'm not really.
Yeah, it is dementia is hard, but it's hard to imagine until you've been there what it's like for family members.
Yeah,
And
it's
it
really
really, I
hard.
think, it takes a special understanding. It takes a special individual, usually an adult child, to manage through it and to understand how to do it. And I'm sure you'd probably agree that obviously you were learning about it as you went through. Like if you are going to take it on, you better understand what you're signing up for because it's more than
Yes.
changing band-aids and like what we think of as
It
medical
is.
care,
And
right?
all the things that work with people who are cognitively impaired are counterintuitive to the way we do everything. Alzheimer's Association actually is a great resource. But just little things like, they keep asking you the same question, or they're not going to remember it just because you say it 1,000 times. So please don't get mad at them. It's not their fault. They cannot form the memory, but people don't understand that, and they just keep badgering them, and you can't do it.
Right.
Or
Right.
you got an aggravated, confused person on your hands. So there's a lot to know about how to deal with those people. It's
Yeah. And as the
hard.
adult child, you're dealing with someone who doesn't even recognize me anymore, which just pulls at the heartstrings in
It
ways
does.
that,
It
yeah,
makes it tough. It
yeah,
does.
yeah. It's hard to look past that and deal with the challenge of the
It is.
person in
And
front of you.
sometimes, frankly, he was very nasty, and we
Yeah.
would just leave.
Yep.
I don't know what you're doing here. He had more colorful language, but it was
Well, that
basically
happens
go,
sometimes with age anyway.
yeah, go away. And we did. We went away.
Yeah. And the other, just kind of setting the stage here, I thought was good, is you have authored a number of books, which I did not realize. Your latest book, I think, it looks like came out last year, My Life, Dodging Curveballs, Jumping Hurdles. If I'm clipping it off here, and there's more to it than that. Um, tell me a little bit about what that book is about, maybe just in terms of it sounds like it's managing the obstacles of life somehow.
That is kind of what it is. A little bit autobiographical. I tell various stories based on portions of my life when, not everything went wonderfully well, and how I dealt with it, and how it's life. And you can't give up, and you can't, for example, trying to make partner. Obviously, it was way harder for me because I was female, and I knew it would be. And I knew I wasn't going to change the mentality and sensibility of older male partners just because of my physical presence. This is what I got into, and I knew it, and I decided I'm going to get through it. And my goal is make partner. However that needs to pan out, I'm going to do it, and not be bitter and angry about it. What is the point? Bitter and angry just hurts me. So I decided not to go down that road, and eventually I got in. It's a long, very amusing story how I got in. One of my 10 books is about that.
Cool.
But it not the logical thing was the problem. So
Well, I think you kind of set the stage for maybe where we'll take the conversation forward from here is really this notion of the direction or the path of life. Most of us naively think, we have a plan. I'll call it Plan A for the lack of a better term. Of
yeah,
we have some idea of how life is going to play out, and ignore some of the changes that have happened along the way. But for someone like you who has had significant shifts or pivots, it's probably a little bit more obvious to you in terms. And again, when you start working with older adults, you realize it almost never plays out the way you plan. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing,
right.
right? We assume plan A is going to be the best outcome. And reality is, unless you really understand what aging looks like, there may be much better plans than plan A. And just kind of sticking your head in the sand is probably about the worst thing you can do for all sorts of reasons. But one is clearly miss better opportunities that are
Yes.
waiting for you, right?
And kind of another thought along those lines that I have frequently. I'm a worrier. I worry about everything imaginable. And here's my reality. All the stuff I spent all that time worrying about, none of that comes to fruition. Something else comes up from behind me that I hadn't even worried about, and becomes the problem.
Right. Right.
Same
Well,
thing. Yeah, plan,
yeah.
plan. It's not, I mean, look, you got to take it as surprises are coming. Some will be wonderful, some won't be, and you just go through it and you make the best you can. And every experience, no matter how awful, helps form you into the person you are, and it's valuable.
Yeah. And so long as the person you are tomorrow is a little better than the person you were yesterday, that's progress, right?
Exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
that would be a good goal.
Yeah, it's not it's not worrying about the end line or the getting over the goal line. It's often
Right.
just
It's the journey.
right, right.
Enjoy the journey.
So you spend your time now in wellness coaching. Let's just talk about kind of a little bit maybe about what is wellness coaching for people who maybe have heard the term, but they really have no direct experience with it. And again, for the people who think they're going to get all the answers on the internet because it's all in information, you can probably speak to this piece in a way that they will never understand otherwise. So as a I don't know how the best way to explain that to people. Obviously, maybe from what a client experiences or what types of clients you have and why do they thrive with a wellness coach when they might flounder and continue to get frustrated otherwise?
Well, my view is most of the time, most of us ignore our health. Why? Because we're juggling 10 balls and we cannot drop one of those, or we get fired, or we don't pick up our kid at school. Emergencies, just daily life stuff we have to do. And so with health, because your body doesn't scream at you, maybe you're getting a little worse, maybe there's something nagging at you, but you always go later. I know I'm overweight. I know I'm not eating well. I know I haven't been to the gym in a year and a half, but I'll deal with that later. And the problem is it keeps going down on the to-do list all the time, and we just don't make it a priority. And we don't think about it most of the time. So now we're at the state in the US where we have 75% of the population overweight, which is, to me, a pandemic. And it is global. Forget COVID. This is the real problem. And, I think the new administration has somewhat of a clue that this is a problem. When I was a kid, people were not overweight. They just weren't. What's different? The food environment. Totally different. We didn't have all this convenience stuff. We didn't have DoorDash. Mothers cooked at home. And believe me, my mother was a horrible cook, but that was the only choice we had. We may have eaten out, once a year, not because she forgot to defrost the chicken, or not because we thought it would be a fun experience to go sit in a restaurant for 3 hours and have the chef show off. It was just a different environment, and we didn't have fast food. We didn't have drive-throughs. None of that stuff existed. And actually, ironically, I think people knew a lot more about nutrition in those days, because I'm telling you, I got my horrible canned vegetables every night, or I wasn't getting anything else.
Yeah,
So
as you were
the
saying
food
there,
environment is drastically different, and people are very much into convenience and very much into delivery. I've had clients come to me, they DoorDash twice a day. That's a 40% markup, and they do it anyway because they don't know anything about how to have an alternative healthy thing. A lot of people don't know what healthy food is. And the other thing I noticed is I go in the grocery store and I'd say 3/4 of the aisles are full of junk food. That didn't exist in my day. Now we got, 18 kinds of Cheerios. We had one. Now we got seasonal things. We didn't have pumpkin season and, mocha peppermint season and all these
right?
things. And so what I know is taste buds adapt to whatever you feed them. So if you continually give them all this processed soft food, snacky, sweet food, that's what you will crave because that's what they want. But we know even from brain imaging studies that taste bud preferences change. And if you eat healthy things, then your body's going to like healthy things. I always tell people nobody was born an In-N-Out burger. They really weren't. So if you tell me you crave In-N-Out burger, I just know you went there 1,000 times.
Right. Yeah, we talk about essentially how the body adapts to whatever it's presented with, right?
It
In
does.
terms of
It does.
activity, food, yeah, and to say, and so there's an assumption that doing something different is going to be better or worse, whatever reference point we're talking about, and making a change. Um,
So,
we're
so
more
I kind of went off on a tangent, but my approach is You need to learn how to live in the real world. This is the world we live in. It is hard to change what goes in here. It is the hardest thing to do right now, and it's ironic because no one is shoving food in your mouth except you. Unfortunately, as a wellness coach, I cannot put duct tape on your mouth, and you can't cold turkey food. So it's a lot dicier than anything else, like giving up alcohol or cigarettes. It's just harder, and it's way harder than exercise because that's a once a day thing, however many times a week, and you're done. Food decisions and food everywhere all day, the entire time you're awake. So it is very hard, but it's very doable. And it's so hard that most people realistically can't do it without the help of somebody like me. It is too hard to stay on track. They don't have the skills. They don't have the time I do, since I don't have a real job, to think about little techniques that are going to help people. So to me, it's about changing behavior. That's what it's about. And we know how you change human behavior. We have all kinds of research. And first, you start becoming conscious of what you're doing, and you get it out of the autopilot so you can actually make a different choice. So a lot of times when I'm coaching people, I say, we're on step one now. You noticed, when you came in, you told me you weren't a stress eater. Now that you've had to keep the food diary for a week, you came in and said, I guess I am a stress eater. But they never even realized it. And we go very slowly with behavior change because we're quite attached to our habits, and it hurts. And it hurts. If you go fast, you're going to have boomerang effects. So I want people to go very slowly. And I say, please don't go into diet mode on me. Lose the weight slowly, because the important part is keep it off. Most of my clients are weight loss. I have weight gain. I deal with stress. I deal with sleep, hydration, the whole health package, exercise. I'm a certified trainer as well, because all those things go together. Stress may be directly affecting your food choices more than anything else.
As you were talking there, it made me think of like the 5 stages of grieving. So do you have kind of something similar that you overlay when you're trying to take behavior change and take people through behavior change in terms of some steps that where, to get to that last line, we need to first start here and kind of figure out which journey you're on and who you are?
Here's the reality. Everybody's brain and everybody's body is different. And so my job and my joy is to help them get inside their own head and figure out what keeps them on a healthy track. And a lot of it is just planning ahead so you don't get to go, ooh, what could I have for lunch? Because then you're probably going to make a bad choice, or you let yourself get starving. Biology kicks in, you're going to make a bad choice. So we got to figure out what skills and techniques they need to focus on that are going to help them make sustainable change. And I emphasize sustainable change. Losing 100 pounds is no good if you don't have the skills to keep it off because you didn't do it properly, like you did Ozempic. I'm now getting people who are on one of the injectables come to me. Why? Because they're petrified they're going to regain the weight, and they are, unless they change their habits. And frankly, while they're on one of those injectables, they really need to eat super healthy foods because they don't have a lot of calories to play with. And so if they're eating junk, they're going to be nutrient deficient.
So say a little bit more about that, because I think it's so important to kind of explain that for people if it's the first time they've heard what you're speaking to there. Because they're so focused on weight loss equates to health, as though it's just that simple.
Yeah, fast weight loss is a very bad idea for a lot of reasons. Biggest reason being you're going to lose lean muscle mass, and that's ultimately going to slow your metabolism down. So if I get a client who's on one of the injectables, I tell them, you got to weight train, you got to do strength training, super important. And it really helps to go slowly because that's the way your body adapts properly. Here's my idea of what a normal diet is, keto, intermittent fasting, any of those magic fix kind of things. Time out, tell me what to put in my mouth. So you'll do it for a while when the scale's going down. And then at some point you're going to go, I can't live this way for the rest of my life. you will ditch your diet, and no matter how much weight you lost, you still have the same skills that got you overweight, so it's coming back on. So it's a complete waste of time. What I like is something akin to Mediterranean or more vegetarian, plant-based. We know that's the healthiest diet. We have 50 years of research. That's what people need to be eating. They need to be eating from all the healthy food groups, the stuff that God put on the earth for us to eat. Hello. It grew in the ground, it grew on a plant, it walked, it swam. That's what people are supposed to be eating, not packaged Cheez-Its. So we're eating packaged Cheez-Its and we develop a taste for them and they're convenient and everybody's snacking their way through life. They forgot how to eat real meals anymore.
Yeah, and I think it's probably worth kind of talking a little bit about the why they're whole foods plant-based and not just plant-based in terms of what we see on labels. Well, generally we're talking about the difference between food that looks like the way it was presented or grown or in a package and it has some kind of nutrition label,
Yeah,
right?
my feeling is nutrition labels can be very helpful, but I'd rather buy something and eat something that doesn't even need a nutrition label.
Right.
That's the healthiest food. But learning how to read them is a valuable skill, and a lot of people don't know how to read them, or they just look at the calories and they ignore added sugar or saturated fat because they don't know how to read the thing properly.
Right. Yeah. So there's all kinds of foods in the grocery store now because companies get on the bandwagon that's called plant-based. That
Yes.
is, and look at the
Well, and
list of
a
ingredients, right?
lot of the, replacement for beef and stuff like that, I don't like that kind of food because it is so processed.
Right.
You're better off with some grass-fed beef than, Impossible beef or whatever these other ones are. I'm not a big fan of those because there's too much process. The problem with processed food, aside from who knows what's in it and why does it have a bunch of things I can't even pronounce, even though I did go to school, is that all of the work your body is supposed to do and does so well to pull out the nutrients and digest food, all done in the manufacturing plant. So it's going to quickly convert to energy and then you're going to have a slump. So same amount of calories, but it's not going to get you from one meal to the next the way something you chew that your body needs to digest does. And a good example of that is juice. Juice is not healthy. We would promote it to the kids especially. It's a sugar rush crash and it doesn't have any of the fiber in it that you need. You are much better off eating 2 oranges than a glass of orange juice, but most people still think it's healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we think about kind of people who are good candidates to get a coach, one of them we hear in all sorts of avenues of kind of, I'll call it midlife, whatever age that means to people. It doesn't really matter.
It gets older as you get older,
That's
that
right.
midlife thing.
um, is this idea or this recognition of getting stuck, where we kind of just, I don't know where to start. And so, or this, it seems like too much work because there's too much
Yes.
uncertainty, too much unknown. So that to me is always kind of and going back to where we said earlier, going to the internet is just going to flood you with more confusing information, right? And so
Yes.
more uncertainty results in you continuing to be paralyzed because it's
Yep.
overwhelming, right?
So most people flit from one magic fix to another, and then their girlfriend did this and lost weight, and they're going to try that, and they try this, and they come to me. They've tried everything. And one thing that's a big myth is usually the first thing somebody does who's trying to get healthy, they go to the gym. That is not an effective weight loss tool, but people think it is, and the trainer will tell you it is. It's not sufficient. It just doesn't work for that purpose. It works for a million other things like stress relief and health, but it's not an effective way to get weight off you. That's 80% the jaw muscle.
So where do you start with I'll kind of say the candidate is the professional who's been eating slowly kind of developing an eating pattern over the decades, has a busy life and said, I just don't have time. And I have the money to pay for whatever option I want in terms of, DoorDash twice a day is clearly not an inexpensive solution. So for that client, kind of take me kind of down the road and mainly kind of where do you start? Because
Here's where I start, and this is a good opener because people are taken aback by this. I say, you know what? I barely cook, but I get healthy food in here. That's the only goal. You take any shortcut that gets it in there. And a lot of it is planning ahead, getting it in the house, and deciding how much time to devote or not to meal planning. I mean, some people spend all weekend doing it. I don't do that. I have other things to do. So I tell people, you find what's realistic for your life, and it could be different week to week, but you got to already have the food in the house, prepped to a level where you can easily, stick it in the microwave or something. There are a lot of the health foodie type stores now that have prepared healthy stuff or frozen healthy stuff. Use them. You don't have to do everything yourself, but what I caution people to avoid is restaurant prepared food. And here are the reasons. When you get an entree, which they highly encourage each individual to get, it's 3 servings, 3. So if you finish your plate, you ate 3 times as much food as you need. But the real problem is they want it to taste yummy, because if you had a yummy meal, you're likely to return. So how do you make yummy? Butter, oil, sugar, salt to the max, to the max. So even when you get down to 1/3, it's still got way more calories because of all the butter and oil. That's the problem. You would never put that much in it at home unless you were a professional chef on one of the cooking shows where they all say fat is flavor, and they use some kind of pork, belly or something like that that has a ton of fat and everything tastes great. But that's not a healthy way to live. And also, you need to learn about how many calories are in things and what's healthy and what's not. There's a lot of misinformation out there. I have people keep a food diary and a log because accountability matters a ton while you're going through the process, because it's easy to fall off. It's easy to have a bad day and just, have a bad week after you have the bad day. So I tell them to keep a food log in an app. It's called My Fitness Pal. I like that one because I can be their friend and friends can see what they're up to. So they know I'm lurking when they have to admit to the 4th cookie after I told them not to buy the Girl Scout cookies, But a lot of it is strategies. And I say in the house, in the mouth. Once you buy that snack that you like, you know what? You're not going to be able to portion control. You're going to eat it. Don't bring it in if it's that dangerous. But doesn't mean you never have ice cream till the day you die. It means once in a blue moon, you go out to a creamery and you have the really rich stuff, not Yogurtland, but the good stuff. You have a reasonable portion and you enjoy it. Craving satisfied. If I had ice cream in my house, I'd be eating it every night just because my brain knows it's there and I can justify it some way. I had a client the other day, she wanted to buy 3 different snacky snacks. I said, how about just one? She said, the ice cream. I said, okay, I'm looking at her food diary. And she's sending me pictures too. First, she has a 1/2 cup serving, which is appropriate. And then I see her add the rest of the pint later on in the night.
yeah, yeah,
That's what happens.
chasing the experience, right, of the first taste.
Yep. And here's the reality. The studies show the first 3 hits of something sugary sweet are the most intense. And after that, it really is diminishing returns. And I've taught a lot of people to use the 3-bite rule. And it really does work. But the key is you don't put more than 3 bites on your plate, because then it's too hard because we're visual.
Yeah, and I've done that with people like in terms of to understand the concept, to test it, and if you do it consciously as an awareness versus well, I'm trying to get away, or I'm just kind of going to sneak it a little bit.
Yeah,
No, get it out in the open. Let's run it as an
bad.
experiment and actually be transparent about it, because it doesn't matter whether I know it. all that matters is that you know it and you've experienced it, because once you convince yourself, it's far more convincing than anything anyone else can tell you, right?
We can talk a lot of, we can talk ourselves into a lot of behavior, good or bad, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But a
And
lot of it to me, people tell me I don't have the willpower to do this. And I say it really has nothing to do with willpower. It's about make the environment as easy as you can for yourself, which is planning, not bringing stuff in the house, having healthy snacks with you, looking at restaurant menus, thinking about being a little bit demanding and ask for all kinds of changes like I do. Set it up so it's easier. If you go on willpower, you're going to get exhausted and you're going to lose ultimately. So don't try to do that to yourself. It's not about that. It's just about more consciousness about what you're putting in your mouth and figuring out what's a healthy breakfast that gets me to lunch without me thinking about food. Three
it,
meals usually work better than snacking throughout the day. They just do.
yeah, yeah, I remember that one. So
The
it
other, the
sounds
other
like,
thing that's really important, I don't want to interrupt you, but slow down because the body is designed to want 20 minutes for your gut and your brain to go, Scott's 80% full, stop eating. But most of us, our brain is not on the food we're eating. We're doing something else or two other things. And it's really easy to overeat when you do that and not even realize it. And you didn't even enjoy the food. So I have people setting 20-minute timers because it matters. And they go, oh, yeah, gee, that made a big difference. And I say, your brain needs to be on the food, only on the food. It's hard to do.
have you tried the number of times to chew a food before you swallow? It's
Yeah,
kind of
that's
in the same
yeah, it's
genre,
the same kind of thing. And I
right?
tell them, put the fork down. Trust me, I've never seen one run away yet.
Yeah. So part of this obviously involves going to a grocery store, and going back to the double DoorDash a day means
Yeah, but
I don't ever go to the grocery store.
sometimes actually not going to the grocery store and ordering online and having them deliver it is good. You know why? No impulse buys.
Right, right.
You don't see the stuff at the end of the aisle, so sometimes that can actually be a bit better. Because a
Right,
lot of a
yeah.
lot of my clients hate grocery shopping. They just hate it.
Yeah, that's what I see parallels of. They don't like the grocery store for whatever reason, right?
Yep.
It's not high value time.
Yep. But you
I
can do a
quite
lot
like
of
it.
that
So
online since COVID. That's one benefit of it. About the only one I can think of, but that's a different discussion.
yeah, well, I like to get to know the people at the grocery store just because, yeah,
You
the
find out a lot.
yeah,
When are the eggs coming in? When's the toilet paper going to show up? It's important.
yeah, it's a big thing right now with egg shortage around the country to know when to go that you actually stand a chance. Because yeah, I go in and they're
Yep, I know. It's
cleared
nothing.
out. The so we talked a little bit about trying to get unstuck. Talked about the grocery store, and I think we didn't really raise up, but you talked about it a lot. But is the barriers around kind of man or putting barriers in place and making the easy food convenient, putting barriers in front, right? So that once you bring it into the house, essentially you remove the barrier that it would take to get up and go out to the
Yes.
creamery, for example, to go. That's part of you're
Yeah,
actually putting a
although there
barrier in
is
place,
there
right?
is DoorDash, unfortunately, these days. The first thing I tell my clients is delete the app,
Yeah.
please. Because that makes it way easy.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big part of it. So how do you pair the nutrition and the exercise piece? Because we kind of talked a little bit about that earlier, but obviously we know those two go together. So how do you typically approach that with people?
I take them where they are, which is what I do with everything. So if they're doing no exercise, I suggest maybe you could do a couple of 10-minute walks. Don't make it a big deal. Doesn't need to be super strenuous. And frankly, if someone comes to me who is very overweight, what happens is it hurts to walk. The knees hurt, the hips hurt. And so I say, let's worry about the nutrition first. We will deal with exercise when you feel like it. And 9 times out of 10, they'll come in and say, here's what I started doing, because now they're ready to do it. And I also say, look, there are a couple things to work on in your health, and maybe stress is another one, but we're not going to do everything at once. because that's adding more stress. I want the goals that we set together every week to feel 80% doable. So it's not going to be a stretch. And I want people to get some confidence back, because when people come to me, they're very defeated because they tried all these diets and the diets failed them, and they think they're the biggest loser in a bad way, and they're never going to figure it out, and it's hopeless, and they're going to be overweight and out of shape forever. And it's not the case. It's the diets that fail them. So I say, go slowly. We'll figure it out together. And I act like a partner. And I'm very empathetic with people. I never reprimand them. But I can crack the whip too, because some people need that. They say, I want you to do this. I say, I'm fine. I'm a New York litigator. I think I can handle it.
Bring
Or
it.
they say, I was worried that you would, oh, you're scary. I go, okay, good.
Yeah, yeah, no, I get it, right? Because if your coach isn't honest with you, what's the
Right.
likelihood of
Or
success?
she's too nice. Oh, that's okay, honey. You had a stressful life. When they come into me with, oh, it was a terrible week, I say, look, it's called life. You got to deal with it. You can't let your health go because you had a stressful week. Because every week is going to be stressful in some way. Stress
Right.
is not going away. You got to figure out how to keep this front and center despite whatever curveballs you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And people can. And I have a lot of people going through all kinds of emergencies. I have people going through cancer treatments and all kinds of things. They're able to keep their health front and center. It's a matter of what your priorities are. People say they don't have time to exercise. What I hear is, it's not that big a deal to me. I don't want to make the time.
You alluded a little bit earlier in terms of going slow, so maybe you can kind of talk to us a little bit about timelines on average that just from a starting point, what should people be thinking about as a timeline to make meaningful change from, wherever, without giving you detailed context, but in general, what should we be thinking about in timelines? Because habits, we tend to think about like, 3 months and things, but clearly we're talking about much longer timelines than that.
Usually at least 6 months and often a year. It depends on the person, what they need to change, and basically where they are when they started. But most people, they come to me and they say, I have a pretty healthy diet. And we start looking at their diet. Where's the pretty healthy part? I don't even see it here. So figuring out what works for them and losing slowly. I mean, I talk about a pound a week is reasonable. So, that's a lot. That's a long stretch. And it really does take a long time to instill new habits and behaviors and to get them into the auto program mode, which is where they need to live ultimately and just replace the other ones. But everyone's heard this myth of 21 days, and it was based on nothing at all having to do with behavior change. It had to do with surgical candidates who had cleft palate or something like that, and the surgeon would remedy it. And what he found is it took them 21 days to recognize their new face as their face. What that has to do with changing habits, I don't know, but we've believed this for, 100 years, because I believed it till I looked it up and I went, are you kidding me?
Yeah. Myths that stick around for a while are hard to break, right?
They're very hard to break.
Yeah. Many
So it's a long process, and I tell people, you didn't get in these habits overnight. You're not going to back out of them overnight. It doesn't work that way. And no, the pounds didn't come on, 5 a week. They're not going to come off 5 a week. It's not the way it works. And I also tell people, do not focus on the scale. It does this. It's a wild ride. Focus more on what your body looks like, how you feel, clothes fit. Try on a pair of jeans. It's a little too small. Try them on periodically. You'll see the change there. And that's what we care about ultimately. We're going to
Yeah,
see changes
that
in our
was exactly
body.
where I wanted to go, because it's this, if all the scale is your metric of success or failure, like, get rid of the damn thing, because
That's what I say. Throw it
right.
out the window. I wish it had never been invented,
Yeah,
frankly. I
well,
hate
and
it.
I when I hear people say, well, my goal is to lose weight, I said, well, then you're not ready to start, because until your goal is health, what weight
Right.
is just one aspect of health.
Right.
But it's clearly, you could lose 100 pounds and be less healthy than you are today, as hard as that is to believe.
It's true.
Right.
And the first thing I tell people, which is surprising, is once you start eating healthy food and not junky food, which makes you feel junky, you're going to have much better energy even before you notice any body changes at all. And people do not make the connection between how they feel and how they function based on what they put in their mouth. They just don't think about it. And it really does make a difference.
I think partly so that's a hot topic that we talk about with great excitement, because part of the problem is there's virtually no studies on that. But for those of us who work in this field and when we eat crappy food for whatever reason, we notice it right away, right? But there's no kind of common understanding of if you're part of your stress that you deal with every day is due totally to the food that you eat.
It's
Dealing
true.
with the exact same stressors with healthy food will have very different results in terms of how you respond to whatever that stressor is, right?
Yes. And a lot of people, they're just not really in touch with their body and how they feel. And most changes that happen because of poor health habits happen very incrementally. So eventually they just, oh, I'm just getting older. I hit 40 and this happened. I hit 50, I hit menopause. I say, you know what? I've been through all those things. Don't give me that. Doesn't work in my world. Good try.
Yeah. No, well, this has been a great discussion, Lorie. I think the whole issue of behavior, I think, really gets at really what we're talking about here. Finding people when they're ready to put their hand on that door handle.
They got to be internally motivated. We can't give them motivation if they don't care.
Right. And so when someone feels that they're ready to go down the path of behavior change, how do they find you? They
can find me on my website, Lorie Eber Wellness Coaching.com, or 714-357-9946. If you want to get one of my books, like How to Tell Food Who's Boss, for example, go on Amazon. I have 10 books to give you all kinds of information and tips.
Yeah, I think I think what you're offering to people is really a partnership in something that's so much easier done as a partnership than trying to do it alone again and again and again.
That's exactly what it is. It's a partnership. I'm not the expert who tells them what to do. I'm a partner.
Right.
But I have knowledge, and I ask them to ask me questions. Any crazy thing you've heard, you run it by me.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Lorie.
Enough, my Apple Watch is telling me it's time to stand, Scott.
Well, I'll let you go, and you can do some jumping jacks or any number of things. So.
Yes. Thank you so much.
This has been an honor. Fun conversation.